Well, hi.
Hello.
I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for coming.
I'm so happy to be here. It's so nice to finally meet you in
Right,
person after
right.
all
We've
our
been
email
right emails and
conversations. And
DMs. Yeah,
yes,
this feels really special. And thank you for doing this, by the
of
way.
course, of course.
So, Housewoman comes out tomorrow, which
It
is
does.
amazing. I was
Hmm.
wondering, what is it like for you mentally to bring your first book into the world?
Wow, it just feels like a roller coaster of emotions, right? Like I go through different emotions depending on what day of the week it is. I'm very proud of myself first and foremost, and
That's
that's
amazing.
something that I'm trying to hold on to because
Mm-hmm.
I think I get in my head as well, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm the type of person who is always on to the next adventure, and I never take time out to celebrate my wins, or not as much as I should. So
Yeah.
this time around, I'm trying to be more intentional about just taking time out to enjoy the process, to not stress out about things I can't control, and
Right.
just to embrace every win and love on my friends, accept the love that I receive,
Right.
and just be in the moment, be present.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like so many of us can relate to not celebrating ourselves when
mhm.
we achieve something. We're just automatically thinking, okay, well, that was a check off of the list, the next thing. So, how have you been celebrating your win so far?
I've been shopping, retail therapy. I have been letting friends take me out to dinner. I have been journaling. I have been, just accepting compliments, right? Like,
Yeah.
so even things as little as that, right? Like a lot of people, including myself, struggle with compliments sometimes. It's like, what do I do in my face? Like, okay, let's just move on. But this time around, I'm just taking time out
And
to just,
sitting in it.
right, to
Yeah.
really sit in it and accept it and chew on it. And so for me the biggest thing with this moment is just reminding myself to be present, right?
Yeah.
Like reminding myself to sit in the moment, to not obsess over what my next move would be, to not
Yeah.
obsess over the next novel. Just sit with this thing that I worked on for the last few years
Right.
and just enjoy the process of being a debut author, because I'm never going to do this again. Like the first novel, this is the
Right.
only time I get to release my first novel. So.
No, I feel like being present for that is also something that I would say I personally struggle with. So, what is your being present like routine? What is your
Yeah.
mental routine, your
Uh-huh.
spiritual practice? What does that look like?
So, in terms of the routine, I try to like have notes on my phone, right? Like just reminders. So I'm very big on reminders. So just sticky notes on the fridge, notes on my phone, friends WhatsApping me. My best friend knows that I struggle with being present in the moment. So she's very big on reminding me when I start to freak out, or when I start to like obsess over my to-do list and all the things I need to accomplish.
Right.
She reminds me to just stay grounded, and she reminds me that I don't need to be superwoman. I just need to enjoy the little wins that come my way, and
Yeah.
to realize that I've worked so hard, and instead of rushing on to the next thing, I could just sit with the moment. In terms of my spiritual practice, I am Christian, and for me, prayers ground me. I'm not always the best at, praying and being religious and going to church, but I try
Yeah.
to remind myself, right, like when I start to get anxious, or I start to get in my head, I remind myself to just carve out time for myself, right? Like
Yeah.
time away from friends, away from family, just quiet time to sit with my thoughts, to talk to God. For me, that's really calming.
Yeah.
And it's something that, it's a work in progress, right? Like some days I'm better than other days, some weeks I'm
Yeah.
better than other weeks, but it's something that I just keep working on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that's the amazing thing about having a spiritual practice is that it is tailored to you. And I definitely think that prayer is very much so a form of meditation in so many different ways. It's you being with yourself in a space of
Right.
quiet and no distractions, right? And really connecting with yourself. And it sounds like that's something that's been really helpful for you so far.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
So, I mean, besides being an author, you're also a full-time lawyer, which
Yes.
to me is insane. And I was wondering, how do you juggle both of those very different careers? I guess maybe not very different, but also
Yeah.
different.
Right.
And does that impact you mentally?
Thank you for that question. There's so many lawyers who escape law by becoming authors. I wonder what the statistics on,
I would like to know too.
right? Because when I see a lot of authors who had like a different career path, a lot of them were lawyers before, and it's almost like, burnt out lawyers run to, becoming authors, right? To escape that world. being a lawyer is difficult.
I can imagine.
For the most part, it's like a lot of long hours. I'm a real estate finance lawyer, so my practice is completely transactional. And when we have a lot of deals closing, the hours are really brittle, right? Like we could be working till 2 a.m., till 3 a.m. Yes.
Wow.
So it is brittle. And, you know, when I started the job, in 2018. It was definitely a shock to the senses to realize that the work never stopped on the weekends, you know, on vacation. It's just constant.
Wow.
So for me, the biggest thing was creating boundaries. And it's something that I still do. Even though I've been working for 4 years now, right? Like boundaries are why I've lasted as long in the practice, because I quickly realized that without creating boundaries, the work just never stopped.
Right.
Like there was no time to sleep because the work was endless.
Right.
So I try to stay away from my work emails at certain hours unless I know it's like completely urgent. Like unless there's a deal closing the next day and I can't afford to, you know, step away. I'm very big on, you know, not checking work emails at certain times, trying to carve out time on the weekends to just be a human being, like just to enjoy time with loved ones, with friends. Because with these jobs, it just is nonstop. And if you don't create boundaries, no one is going to do it for you. It's just going
to take over. Right.
And so writing in so many ways, it's helped with my mental health. It's really, really was helpful because I needed breaks from the work. The work, you know, it's very challenging and it's very stimulating, both in positive ways and in ways where it can feel like too much, like you need a break from it. And so writing was that salve, right? Like it was that distraction from the rigors of the work. And it probably didn't help with my sleep schedule, but it just felt nice to come back from work and shut off that part of my brain and turn to my draft of Housewoman and write. And it was this thing where I didn't have, you know, the inputs of co-workers or my partners, and so it could be just my thing.
Right.
And so that felt really validated. It just felt really good to have something that was just my thing, and I didn't have to get feedback from co-workers and partners. And it wasn't easy to juggle it, but I also believe that when you really love something and when something's your passion, you carve out time for it against all odds.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it worked out, right?
It did.
All those, like, long nights and long hours.
Yes,
and
it
now
paid off, for sure.
It
definitely paid off.
Yeah. So do you think in the future that you'll continue juggling both?
Yes, I think so. I don't know for how long. I wish I could say for sure, but finances are very important, right? Like I need to pay my bills.
Let's be real.
Right, exactly. So until that 7-figure book deal comes through, I probably will juggle both, right? I don't know how long I'll be in big law because I'm in big law right now, and the hours are even crazier in big law.
Very demanding.
Right, it's very demanding. But I do intend to practice law for as long as I can. And, you know, I never want to predict the future. Yeah. Right. I just want to take it one step at a time. So right now it just feels right to juggle both and try to make it work.
For sure. For sure. And I mean, like, we live in a world that requires us to have constant income. So, you know, of course it would be nice to just be like, I'm sure to just be like, I'm just an author now. Like, I'm just going to stop everything
I have those
else.
bills. The bills are there. They have to be paid.
So I want to shift a little bit to talking more about identity. So something that you share with me is that you were originally born in Nigeria and lived there for many years before coming here. How has that impacted your identity and how you view yourself in this world and country that we live in that's very confusing?
Yes. Well, it has made me very arrogant, like a lot. I'm joking.
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Because I love Nigerians. I mean, I love us for real. But, you know, we think we're the best things since sliced bread. I think, you know, in so many ways, I'm grateful for the background, right? Like, I'm grateful that I was born in Nigeria and spent most of my formative years there because America is a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot for Black people, period.
As someone who's had the opposite of it.
Right. So it's a lot. And I didn't come here prepared for just how much of a transition you know, or just how much your identity impacts you in the US, right? Like, because you're in Nigeria and you're Black, and,
Everyone was
you know,
the same.
everyone is Black, so you don't really think of that, you know. I mean, there is tribalism, right? Like, there is
and
tribalism.
classism.
And classism, so it's far from perfect, but you don't have to navigate your Blackness in the same way that you have to in the US, right? So you grow up and, you know, no one is placing ceilings, artificial ceilings on how much you can achieve just based on your race, right? Like, no one is expecting you to underperform because you're Black, right? You grow up just being told that the sky's your limit. And then you come to the US and people are suddenly shocked that you're great at whatever, right? So I do think that coming to the US was what really made me understand, like, or made me have a stronger relationship with my identity as a Black woman. Like, before coming to the US, I thought of myself as a Black person, but I mostly thought of myself as a woman, and an Igbo woman specifically. Like, I didn't have to grapple with my Blackness as much. So coming to the US was a re-education in so many ways, learning about Black history, learning about, you know, just the racial dynamics and tensions in the US, and continuing to learn about it, right? Like,
it's never ending.
Right, exactly. And picking up on microaggressions, right? Like, it took a while because I came in, you know, doe-eyed.
Right.
So, you know, certain slides would pass me by, and it took being here for a longer period of time to really pick up on these things and really be able to interrogate them and challenge them when, you know, I was confronted with those microaggressions. And it's something I still do when my parents are around, because my parents live in Nigeria and they only come to visit. So I'm very intentional about being around them, especially when they're outside, just to make sure that
then no one's treating them unfairly.
Right. So yeah.
What was it like when you first came and recognized all these things that you now know to be racist or microaggressions, right? How did it impact you negatively to know, like, oh, this person wasn't saying this to be, you know, funny or kind. They were saying this because they're racist.
Yes. I think of one of the most jarring experiences with microaggressions that I faced, because for the longest time, it was mostly me hearing about other people's experiences, friends' experiences, acquaintances' experiences. And I feel like I was pretty sheltered because I had like a very small circle of friends. And moving to Houston specifically, where there's a big Nigerian population and it's pretty diverse, it's so easy to live in your little bubble.
That's very true,
Right,
actually.
right?
That's another thing I noticed when I
So
first moved here.
I would say my first jarring experience with someone who was a friend at the time was when I moved to Philly for law school. And I remember going out to dinner with a friend, a new friend, and we were both vying for an internship, because your first year of law school is super competitive.
That's
you
what
know,
I
like
heard.
everyone is competing for limited internship slots, for the prestigious slots.
Right.
And she just made an offhand comment about how she was sure I would get it because I was Black. And she was just like, yeah, in this country, Black people get everything.
Wow.
And
Wow.
because I had never been confronted by, call it racism, call it microaggressions, call it prejudice, in such a blatant manner, it took me a couple of minutes to process what had just happened. Because I was just stunned, because this was someone I considered to be a friend, and she really did. She didn't even think there was anything wrong with her perspective.
Yeah,
She wasn't
she thought
trying
it
to
was
be,
a compliment.
Yeah, exactly. She wasn't trying to be offensive. She was just being, you know, very factual from her perspective, right? Like, you're gonna get it because you're Black. And that was a turning point for me, because after that, it just became easier to spot situations like that, right? Like, I would work my butt off to get, you know, a job or whatever, and people just think that it was because I was a diversity hire or diversity, filling a quota. And, you know, how do I confront it? So with that one, because it was the first experience, it took me a minute to process it. And, you know, I had to have a conversation with her after the fact and, like, just tell her, yeah, like, I'm sorry, we can't be friends.
Like, that's not
if this is your
okay.
perspective.
Right.
But now I just try to be more intentional about interrogating it in a moment. I don't mind having uncomfortable conversations, right? Like, I just think it's so important to confront these things when they happen and just let people know that it's not okay. I mean, whether or not it will change people's perspectives, that's to be seen. But I try not to carry that burden, because for me, I know who I am, right? Like, so no one can tell me about myself. I think is there an Achebe quote where it's like, I don't know I'm paraphrasing it, but there's a quote along the lines of, you can't tell me who I am, right? Like you can generalize, or you can describe me from your perspective, but who I am is something that would always be personal to me.
Yeah.
So I really believe in that, right? Like, so I never try to carry on those, perspectives, racist perspectives.
Yeah.
I just look at it as a them problem and I continue to live my life. Right?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, as you should, right? And something that I was thinking about as you were talking is like, you face these things pretty much on a day-to-day in every industry that you're in. Have you faced it as an author at all?
No, I don't think so. Or maybe I've missed it happening. Maybe I've just been, in my little rose garden with my rose-tinted lenses. But
Yeah.
I'm also a debut author, and I would say this week is like the first week where I'm venturing out of my bedroom or wherever I write, right, to really, put myself out there. So,
Yeah.
and I think because I'm a lawyer, right, like I haven't been in this literary world for so long. So for the longest time, I feel like I've been sheltered and protected from the excesses of like the literary scene or the publishing industry, and it's just been like this my pet project, my side project. And I think the more I delve into it, the more I'll probably confront these things. I've heard stories for sure.
We all have.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm very well aware.
Right.
But to say that it's been my experience, I wouldn't say so, at least not to my knowledge. Right. So
Right. Is that something that does bring up any fears or anxieties for you of now, like going from writing that's something that was so personal to you to now having it out in the world for everyone's consumption and for
Right.
everyone to critique and have their own
Yes.
opinions about?
Yes, for sure. Feedback, I don't know, like feedback stresses me out. I just want positive feedback. Like, I mean, we
Sure.
all do, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I try to be realistic about these things,
Yeah.
right? Like, it is what it is. Humans are who they are. I don't expect everyone to, I expect racists to exist. I expect people with problematic views to exist,
Yeah.
right? So for me, how I can continue to function and continue to write more other novels beyond House Woman is to focus on what's important, the love from loved ones, from friends, from readers,
Right.
actual critiques that are meaningful, that are grappling with the text as they should, and to block out the noise. And maybe, I don't know if this is the best way, but for me, this is what works, because
Yeah.
I feel like, there is that distraction, right? Like when you continue to try to prove yourself, right? Like Toni Morrison says, the very real issue with racism is it distracts you from the work, right? Like people tell you you're this, you're that based on your race or whatever, and then
Right.
you spend ages trying to prove that you're not. So to the best of my abilities, and it's not always easy, right? Like it's so
Definitely
easy to
not.
say, oh, of course, I will shut out the noise, the haters. But the reality is, we're human, and
Yeah.
of course things would affect me if I expose myself to those reveals, if I go on Goodreads, whatever. But to the best of my abilities, I'm just going to try to focus on what's important.
Yeah.
Churning out more novels and, improving my craft.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I feel like that is the best way. And you said you don't know if it's the best way, but it's whatever works for you,
Right.
right? It's like whatever keeps you grounded and confident in your work and yourself. And it seems like you're on a good path to that for sure. For
I
sure.
hope so.
So, I mean, we're both Nigerian, and there's a lot of mental health stigmas that I would say for myself, I grew up learning.
Yes.
It has to do a lot of work unlearning, and I'm wondering if you've had the same experience too, and how that process has been for you.
Yes. So, I think the traditional point of view of like most older Nigerians is, you can pray your way through everything, right? Therapy is something that, older Nigerians, a lot of older Nigerians still struggle with, like they just don't understand it. A lot of older Nigerians think the West, is very quick to label,
Right.
things that people are grappling with, challenges that younger people or whoever is struggling with as, this mental health issue.
Right.
But I do think that there's been a change. It's a slow change.
It's subtle.
It's very
Yeah.
subtle, but at least amongst younger Nigerians, right? Like I have friends in therapy. Like therapy amongst our generation, I don't think it
very
carries
normal.
the same, right? Like I don't think it carries the same stigma. I think it's a slow change, and I'm also cognizant of the fact that, my the Nigerians that are in my circle may not reflect, the average Nigerian back home, the average young Nigerian.
Yeah.
But I do hope that with this subtle, slow change, as generations come and go, there'll continue to be progression towards embracing, therapy and like destigmatizing mental health issues and challenges. I mean, it's hard because like as much as there has been a subtle change, you still hear and you still see comments from younger Nigerians who are very quick to shame and blame people struggling with mental health issues and whatnot. But I really do hope that this progress, this subtle change continues and
Yeah. How do you take care of your mental health?
Girl, I've been
Very
trying
real. Very real.
Getting a therapist has been on my to-do list for the longest time. And yeah, it's a problem because I have some close friends and I send 1 or 2 voice notes and I think that that's therapy. They respond. And
it's not.
It's really not. Or I journal and I think that's therapy. And yeah, it's definitely something that I should prioritize. And I think the fact that I'm not prioritizing it like I should tells me that, there's something I need to work through there, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I think, it's so easy to push things like this to the back burner, right? Like until it becomes an actual issue, right? So I do send the voice notes and I do journal and every now and then it feels good, but I do know that actually seeing a therapist consistently would be helpful, in general, but I could be doing a better job. Long story short, I could be doing a better job.
That's a really good, I think, honest answer. Because a lot of us kind of avoid talking about it. Well, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
It depends, right? And I think that you do have some good grounding practices, of course, but I don't know. I mean, not because I'm also a therapist, but having someone to talk to that is not a part of your inner circle to kind of give you the hope and the space to just kind of talk about these things that are bothering your innermost thoughts from a space of no judgment, I think really just is beneficial to anyone. But like you said, there's other things that people are focused on right now. So it's tough to sometimes make it a priority until it feels like it's absolutely necessary.
Right. And I think for me, the other layer of struggle is also wondering how to filter, sift through, the pool of therapists for one that would be good for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I do hear stories from friends about how, it
I've
took
heard
them a
stories
while,
too.
right? Like to find a therapist that really catered to their needs. And so I'm like, even if I start this process, right? Like what are the chances that I would get someone to really speak to my needs and give me what I need? And this is probably just me fishing for excuses, but
I would say yes and no, right? Like I feel like there's a 50-50 truth there.
So it aids with my procrastination, right? Because when I'm procrastinating, I'm like, it will probably still, take a while to find someone that would really connect to me in the way that I need them to work through things that I need to. But that shouldn't be an excuse, honestly. Like, even if it takes me a while to find someone, it's still worth the journey, right?
For sure. And again, I'm not just saying that because I am also a therapist. I have my own therapist too. And I think that having someone, like you said, like it's just invaluable once you do find that person. But, especially since you are going to be more public facing now, right? It could be nice to have a therapist in your toolkit as someone that you can talk to every week to be like, hey, this is what happened, or like I'm really struggling to maybe do my grounding practices right now because I'm feeling really anxious or stressed. Just having that person to be there for you.
I agree. So I need to prioritize that, push that to the top of my to-do list.
Right. But it seems like writing has also been a big practice for you. What has it given you throughout your life?
It's given me peace. It's given me confidence. I think with law and just with being an overachiever, it's so easy to doubt yourself, right? It's so easy. I remember my summer internship and just wondering and worrying about whether I was good enough. But I feel like with writing, I've never had to question that. It doesn't mean I've felt that I was the best writer I could be, right? But I've always known that this is something that comes easily and naturally to me. It's something I can hone. It's something I can own as well as my thing. And it's something I can continue to improve upon. And it doesn't have to feel like this big fat burden, right? Like it just feels natural. So it has given me peace, right? Like, I can't imagine navigating the last 4+ years of big law and even law school without having a writing project on the side. Like, for as long as I can remember, from the moment I was in high school, I've always had something I was working on, like like that never saw the light of day, some random story. And it's just giving me so much internal joy, right? Like, whenever I first started writing, I would write for myself because I loved reading, and I just would read everything, and I'm like, okay, now it's time to write something, since I'm done reading all the books at my disposal. And so it's just always been my happy place, and it has definitely morphed, and my relationship to writing has grown and changed as the years have gone by. And you know, and that's a concern, right? Like, with being a published author, like, I want to hold on to the childlike awe and wonder of writing without, you know, losing that in, you know, the swell of marketing and like trying to write to the market and all of that. So I'm trying to find ways to balance that as I work on my second novel, what I hoped would become my second novel, right?
Okay.
To hold on to that childlike awe and, you know, the magic of writing. So
yeah, I feel like it's when you do anything that you're passionate about, and then you tie money to it and all of these kind of expectations to it, sometimes it can impact it negatively. And something I was wondering as you were talking is, do your lived experiences impact your writing at all? And if so, in what way?
So if it does, it's not in a direct way, right?
Okay.
I think by virtue of the fact that I'm creating these worlds, it's definitely shaped by conversations I've had, you know, situations I've been in, conversations and situations I've heard about from other people. So it's definitely shaped by the lenses via which I see the world. But when it comes to direct experiences, I try to shy away from that, because I'm also like, these people would read it and would be like, yeah, she's talking about this one thing. So, and I think for me, that's what I love most about fiction. And that's why I don't write as many nonfiction stories or work on as many nonfiction projects as I should maybe do, as my publisher would want me to. Because I feel like with fiction, it lets you take a step back from yourself. And it allows you to be even bolder on the page, or at least for myself, right? Like, I don't want to put myself out there that much. I want to put it out there with people I trust in safe spaces. And so fiction lets me just go all out, because I know I'm not writing about myself, or at least not to the best of my knowledge, right? Like, maybe there are things there, right? Like, maybe when I dig deep, I'm like, okay, this was informed by but to the best of my knowledge, right? Like, I'm creating these new worlds that are shaped by the lenses via which I view the world, but are not directly linked to who I am or to my experiences.
Right. No, I think that's the same reason that I enjoy fiction. So I tell people this all the time, because I'm a therapist. People assume that I only read nonfiction and self-help. I'm not saying that those books aren't important, but what I enjoy the most about fiction is being able to step into someone else's world that there may be similarities in my world, but it's not a direct copy of my life, right? So I get to just be in their life for a second, and I really, really enjoy that.
Right, the escapism of it all. Like, I love just being able to step away from my life and, like, you know, enter this new world and, you know, just shut off my brain for a minute.
Right. I mean, that's how I felt when I was reading Housewoman, to be very honest. I was like...
Very scary.
It takes place in somewhere I've lived, but at the same time, I have no life comparison to that at all. So, yeah, I really
and this is why I don't understand why some people want relatable stories. I'm like, when I think of the stories I love the most, they're not necessarily the ones that I can relate to the most, right? Like, I don't need a relatable story to love the story, right? Like, if I'm still getting that escapism and it's interesting enough, which is to say, white people, you can read diverse stories, right? Like, you don't need to read only books by white authors. Diverse stories are worth it too.
Absolutely. Can you say more about that?
I mean, because, you know, I remember when I was querying, or when Housewoman was on submission, so it went on submission at a really interesting time, right? Like, that was right at the start of the pandemic, with everything shutting down. So there was a lot of uncertainty there. And I remember when the feedback started rolling in from publishers, and, you know, I would get feedback like, oh, this is so compelling and the voice is so strong, but, you know, we don't know how to market this to a US audience, right? Like, there's this element of, you know, of Igbo ontology and what. And I'm like, who cares that people aren't used to these stories?
Right.
It's okay to have stories that are unique and fresh. Like, it doesn't have to be a replica of stories that already exist for it to be worth it. It's like the beauty of fiction is you get to be introduced to new worlds. Because I think of when I was younger and the books I read as a young child, and a lot of them were set in places I'd never been. And for me, that was magical because it exposed me to those worlds. So.
Yeah, I mean, most of the book takes place in Texas. I don't see how you can get more American than that, to be very honest.
Apparently the characters were very eccentric and strange.
Was that upsetting to you to hear that feedback?
It was upsetting, but maybe I'm also super practical because I had braced myself from the start. Like, you know what, rejections are a thing. Don't take it personal. So it was upsetting, but you know what, I took it all on the chin and I tried to not obsess. For me, that is a big thing because I think I'm an obsessive person naturally, right? Like, I can obsess over something. So I try to counteract that by just being like, you know what, let's just focus on something else. So I took the feedback and I just tried to take the parts that actually made sense to me, right? Like, so if there was a nugget of feedback there that I thought could strengthen the draft, I took that. And if it just didn't make sense to me, I discarded it. Like, okay, bye. That's your problem.
It sounds like you stayed confident throughout that as well.
Yes. I believed in the story, that I knew I had to write Housewoman. Like, the short story, I remember the short story I wrote that got shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and how it dealt with, you know, a young woman on her wedding day and just, you know, the discomfort she felt at seeing her husband. And so for the longest time, discussing or exploring the deification of marriage, right, in patriarchal societies and specifically in Nigeria was something that I knew I had to write about. Like, it was just an itch. It was something that I was so fascinated with, morbidly fascinated with, and I knew I had to get it out of my system. And so even with getting feedback from publishers about not being able to publish the novel, first of all, like, the feedback were generally good, right? They were generally like, the voice is strong, but there's a reason we can't publish it, right? So I knew it wasn't about me as a writer. I just knew I had to find the right publisher who believed in it well enough and was ready to take a risk, right? So, yeah.
And I mean, to you, it didn't really seem like a risk. I mean, I guess as someone who also does a lot of research on marriage and the ways that we have definitely upheld it, especially in the Nigerian community and other communities in general, right? That's something that I really enjoyed about the book because it very much so did not glamorize that at all.
No time to glamorize that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like even in our conversation, I'm reflecting a lot personally on just identity and how sometimes we can feel limited in a lot of different ways, just given the climate and things that people have told us and things that maybe that we've internalized, right? Are there any messages that you had to unlearn for yourself to be able to live the life that you live now?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
When it comes to writing, right? And so for me, when it comes to writing, I guess because I have this career outside of writing, I knew it was only going to be worth it if I was writing as authentically as possible. I knew that, you know, if I had to write just for the money or just write to the market and I didn't believe in the story, it's just not worth it for me. Like, I can already do law as a way to just make money without the passion. So for me, writing has to feel authentic. And I also feel the extra, not burden, but the extra responsibility as a writer of color, as a Black woman, as an Igbo woman, as a Nigerian woman, knowing that there are not enough novels out there by people who look like me, to write as honestly and as authentically as I can, because even if it's not everyone's cup of tea, I know that it would be someone's cup of tea. And I know that I would have appreciated a novel like this as a young Nigerian girl in Lagos, Nigeria, in my room, you know, reading novels. So for me, it's more than just, you know, whatever limiting beliefs other people have. I try not to internalize that. I honestly do. And this is not to say it's perfect, right? Like, I do want to make a lot of money from writing, for sure. But
it's very real.
Very real. But I mean, thankfully, there are now examples out there. I think of someone like Akweke Mercy, and their novels I would never have thought they
Never.
would be able to exist.
Never. They're
But
my
they're
top 3
killing
favorite
it,
authors.
right? So it may not be easy, but I do believe that as long as one is writing authentically and has a perspective that they want to put across and are being true to themselves and are talented and are continuing to hone their craft, their readers would find them. The right publisher would find. It may take a little longer or not, but I think it's worth it, right? When it finally all comes together.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power in waiting, right? I think it can be scary, of course, but to know that you stood behind what you did, the thing that you created out of nothing, and it was able to become this thing that you maybe imagined it to be, or maybe even more, right?
Yes.
So another question, and probably to end our session, is I always like to ask, what would the younger version of yourself think of your life today?
Oh my gosh. I don't want to get emotional, but the younger version of myself wanted to be an author for basically since she was 12 years old. I always wanted to be an author, and I didn't necessarily always see the pathway because I didn't know that I could juggle law with being an author. And so what I would say to the younger version, what was the question again? Sorry, I got lost in my emotions.
Yeah, I was just saying, what would the younger version of yourself think of your life today?
My life. She'll be very proud of myself. She'll be very proud that I actually went ahead to accomplish what I said I would. And she would be cheering me on. She would be excited to see what else I have in store in the years to come.
Yeah. I hope you carry that visual with you as you continue on your journey, just sharing your book to the world and continuing to write. And I feel like I've learned so much about you, but also about myself in this talk. So thank you so much for being honest.
Thank you so much, Wale. This was amazing. And thank you for creating this safe space to be as honest as possible.
I'm glad you feel that way. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.